Good morning. My name is Lonette Lynch. I am an associate tutor here at the Norman Manley Law School Legal Aid Clinic. It is my pleasure this morning to be the moderator and facilitator. And I want to welcome you to our third day at the Legal Aid Fair here. Welcome those who are listening, those who will be eager to hear Mr. Robert Fletcher. And just to introduce Mr. Fletcher this morning, Mr. Fletcher has over 40 years experience practicing at both the civil and criminal bar, mostly criminal. He also is a full-time tutor at the Norman Manley Law School. He has tutored criminal practice and procedure, also trial advocacy. He's very passionate about that, always preparing our students here for mock trials. He has come across related issues as it pertains to Ganja, and he will be sharing a practical approach. Mr. Robert Fletcher's topic for today, just a little spliff, possession of marijuana, is it still illegal, and how much is too much?
Unmuted.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Legal Aid Clinic Fair.
Morning. Am I to start now? Good morning. I just thank the Legal Aid Clinic for giving me the opportunity to just discuss this aspect of Ganja as far as the legislation has dealt with it, because it is something that is a significant part of Jamaican society, and there are some things that it will be useful for us to have information on. Okay, so there is a PowerPoint, and right on your screen before you, you will see 3 titles. Thank you. The first is the Dangerous Drugs Act 1948, and in the middle of the screen is the Dangerous Drug Amendment Act 2015 and the Dangerous Drug Amendment Act 2021. And there are 3 reasons why I start with each of these pieces. There are 3 pieces of legislation on the screen. The Dangerous Drug Act 1948, the Dangerous Drug Amendment Act 2015 and the Dangerous Drug Amendment Act 2021. And I don't want this to detain us for too long, but I think for persons who might want to go deeper into all of the rules relating to dangerous drugs, persons watching might want to go on the government website, bring down the act, print the act, so that they can study it and read the various sections of the law. You can see that the Dangerous Drug Act is coming from society trying to deal with dangerous drugs coming from very far. These pieces of legislation do not only deal with ganja. It's not the Ganja Act. It's the Dangerous Drugs Act. It deals with cocaine, morphine, opium, with possession, importation, export, sale, cultivation, etc., etc. And the ganja is only a part of these pieces of legislation. And before I go on, having put before you these three pieces of legislation, I would like to thank the GIS and to recommend, in fact, that the GIS website has on it a lot of very simple information that can help us to get a simple idea of what is present position in relation to ganja in our country. So before I go, so in other words, then what I'm going to do is we have extracted, with the help of the GIS website and my research, the main issues relating to ganja at the moment. So this is not a presentation that is going to go through section 7, section 8, sections of the legislation, because that won't really help us to simplify and isolate the issues with ganja. And having put before you these pieces of legislation, I invite you to go get them if you want to go into the issues in deep, deep detail. Before I go into what the new legislations have done, I just want to speak a little bit about the history of our society's interface with ganja. It is true to say, I think, that many Jamaicans use ganja. Rastafarians use it as part of the sacrament, their religion. I think most Jamaicans will see young men with the palm of their hands turned up in the air and a little knife, and they are cutting. And if you are not exposed, you will say, what is that harm that the person is doing? Are they actually cutting their hands? No, they're actually cutting up the weed. And ganja has also been used as tea in Jamaica, as folk medicine. And there are many people who know that there are people who drink ganja tea, and there are many people who know that if you have a bad cold, ganja tea with a tot of white rum, it is reputed to be able to bounce it away as if it never existed at all. That is to say, the cold. So it's been a long time. It is said that ganja actually came in to our country with Indian immigrants that were brought in to supplement freed slaves around 1834. They had already had a culture in India of the use of marijuana. And so they brought that with them. And so it developed. But of course, so all of us in Jamaica know that it is a standard part of the life of many people. As internationally in the 70s, the problem with ganja and its export was such that our national airline at the time, Air Jamaica, became known as Air Ganja and Air Weed in various national airports where the planes would land to carry our citizens. And in addition to that, to be quite honest, from the point of view of the law, the police were busy arresting a lot of people, irrespective of the amount of ganja that was found on them. And on any given Monday morning that you would find yourself in what was then the resident magistrate court, maybe 2/3 of the matters that would come up in one court would be a spliff, clogging up the court system. And for a long time, persons would ask, is this really necessary? Was the possession of the smoking of ganja was illegal abroad too. And so there's been a long-standing debate about ganja, its uses, and so on. And then I think a series of things happened. First of all, it became very clear that there were some medicinal uses from ganja that were now scientifically proved. So that the use of ganja to deal with glaucoma under prescribed and controlled circumstances in certain doses, there are drugs that are made and available in pharmacies with the medication that has its base in marijuana. And then, of course, the United States has changed its position, and it now allows cultivation and the use. It now allows marijuana to be sold for medicinal purposes and the sale of it in prescribed and controlled circumstances. So that now in Jamaica, we know that there are ganja shops that you can, they don't call themselves ganja shops. They are cannabis cafes, yes, where you can carry yourself fill out a form to show the sellers and proprietors that you have a condition and that it is important that you be given this. And you are sold it. And the life is made much easier because obviously you can get. There are some people in Jamaica who could never have imagined that things could ever have reached to a point like this, where it is now. And so that's the context, that's the historical context, very, very, very briefly, as to where we're coming from to where we are now. And so, having given that brief context, I hope you'll allow me then to turn to the changes that the various legislation have made and for us to look at it. First thing I want to deal with is possession. And if you look on the screen, you will see possession of ganja, and you will see beneath that, and this is what I want you to remember. I want you to remember the word two, the number 2. Over 2 ounces and under 2 ounces. Now, whenever I mention 2 ounces to persons, those who have never smoked ganja, and there are quite a lot of people who have not, and some of those who have smoked but want to pretend that they know nothing about it, ask me, what is 2 ounces like? So I did my research, and I have a container which I'll hold up to the screen. There it is, a little container. This container has in dried mango leaves, not the actual marijuana itself. So I just, brought the container to give you an idea that 2 ounces, that is what you see them cutting up with a little knife. Now, so here is a simple position on the change in the law that I think everybody should know. No offense in law to possess 2 ounces or less of ganja. Cannot be arrested, charged, or tried in a court of law in Jamaica for the possession of 2 ounces or less of ganja. And you cannot get a record for the possession of 2 ounces or less. Over 2 ounces, you can get arrested for over 2 ounces of ganja. But we'll talk about some exceptions to that as we go along. So, police, of course, can accost you. And if you are in possession of 2 ounces or less of ganja, you can be ticketed. That is to say, you can get a ticket, just like a traffic ticket for speeding and all of the various offenses under the traffic law. And you have 30 days to pay the fine. Fine of $500 to be paid at the tax office. And so it is a ticketable offense. And it really is to the discretion of the police officer as to whether he's going to give you a ticket or not. I mean, I imagine a situation where if a police officer finds you on 3 occasions with less than 2 ounces, the police officer might decide that in order to discourage you, what you would like to do is to give you a ticket so that you start to think about the cost of continuing to smoke the ganja, because there's still less than acceptance about the smoking of ganja. So the possession of over 2 ounces is still an offense. And there's also provision in the law that if a police officer believes that you are addicted, police officer can arrest you. The police officer can carry you before the court, especially if you're under the age of 18 years, so that you're still legally a minor. And if it appears to the police that you're dependent on ganja, police can carry before the court and have you referred by the court to the National Council on Drug Abuse for counseling, in addition to having to pay the ticket that has been served on you. So there's an effort here to deal with the issue of addiction. Now, remember I said that you cannot be arrested, and even if and so there will be no record. But if you're found with over, if you found with over 2 ounces and you are arrested, charged, and tried, found guilty, sentenced to a fine, right? That conviction will go on your criminal record. So while the law has changed, there's still, the society still, it appears to be concerned with doing things to stop persons from using ganja. Okay. Now, I imagine that the primary reason that somebody might be in possession of ganja is that they intend to smoke it. So the law has changed some rules which smoking of ganja within 5 meters of a public place is prohibited in law as an offense. Public places, as you might recall, when they were putting some prohibitions on cigarettes, public spaces are like bus stops, public buildings, shops, plazas, commercial buildings, anywhere where the ordinary citizen goes and is located to do their business as a public place. So if you smoke it within 5 meters of that public place, you have committed an offense. You are entitled to, but the law doesn't necessarily give you the right. It says, listen, you're smoking within 5 meters of a public place. Just be careful. I don't know what the person's response is going to be. But the person, it's an offense, and you can be convicted. And also, the police can arrest you. If they ticket you, you have 30 days to pay the fine of $500. And by the way, it is also an offense not to pay the fine. So you can't just sit down and say, and go home and you say to your brethren on the road or whatever it is, you know that them give me a ticket for smoke the ganja near the bus stop. And what of them say? Tear that up. Now, if you don't pay the fine, the ticket, that ticket can be increased to $2,000. And you might have to come to court. And you might be ordered to do community service. Or you might have to pay $2,000. And that is also true of the fine for possession. You do not pay that fine, you can be carried before the court, the fine can be increased, and the court might make any such order, and the offense will be recorded. So you're getting this record, criminal record, just because you refuse to pay the ticket. I hope nobody ends up in the position of the taxi drivers who had hundreds of tickets unpaid. Don't make that happen if you rack up or you know anybody in the community who have several tickets unpaid. It's not necessary for you to have to pay the extra money. Bearing in mind also that from my research, as of what I've been told, the 2 ounces below which you cannot be arrested or charged costs about $500, I understand from my research, depending on the grade. So if you could do without one purchase just to pay the ticket, that will just take care of your life going forward without you having to worry about anything. Now, I'm coming to some exceptions to both possession and smoking, because Rastafarians are granted an exception to the smoking. We'll come to that because it's also connected with cultivation, which is the third thing we want to go to. So far, we have dealt with possession. We know under 2 ounces, over 2 ounces. Ticketing system, we have dealt with smoking, ticketing system, and private. You can't smoke in the public place, but if you have a private place, your home and your yard, and you are smoking your 2 ounces in the yard, it is not an offense in law. In your private premises, it is not an offense. It is an offense in public places. Good. So let us then move to cultivation, because obviously there could be no possession, there could be no smoking if there was no cultivation. How many people would like to have this cleared up? Each household in Jamaica is allowed to have 5 ganja plants, to grow 5 ganja plants legally. They're not allowed to grow more than 5 ganja plants. And there are some yards in Jamaica where there are more than 1 household. A yard might have 3 households, 4 households, different families. Well, each household is entitled to have 5 ganja plants. And that is very, very important. It is very simple. And that is the situation. Each household is entitled to have 5 ganja plants. Right. Ganja can also be cultivated by persons over 18 years old. Rastafarian religion, those persons can apply to grow ganja on their property and can be given permission by the Cannabis License Authority to grow ganja on the property, as long as the place where that ganja is going is to be grown or smoked is a registered place of worship. So there you are, right? So you're in the country, have a group of Rastafarian adherents, and they want to grow the sacrament on their land that they are going to use for their worship services, their irations, their gatherings. Application can be made to the Cannabis Licensing Authority to register your place as a place of worship and to ensure that you get this exemption, this license, which allows you to grow the ganja. Not a soul in this whole wide world can trouble you because you have that particular authority. You have that license. Ganja can also be cultivated. So the Rastafarians can cultivate it. And ganja can also be cultivated by for scientific research, so that a tertiary institution such as the University of the West Indies or any tertiary institution that is carrying out a scientific study of some component of ganja apply, and the Scientific Research Council has authorized this application, or the Scientific Research Council is making the application itself, can apply for authorization to cultivate ganja on lands. So the lands have to be approved, and therefore a third party, like somebody who is raising the ganja and testing it according to the process by which it will be done, is protected, because that land and that license has been granted, which authorizes the person to do that, and the authorization is not subject to the rules against ganja under the Dangerous Drugs Act. So the Rastafarian community can cultivate, having applied for and been given a license, and other bodies can cultivate, having applied for and been given a grant to cultivate it for scientific purposes. Okay. Then there is the importation of ganja. Ganja can be imported to Jamaica by any person who can show that there is a medicinal purpose to their possession of the ganja, so that, for example, they have been granted permission by medical experts in the country of their origin that ganja they need to take in order to ensure that they are receiving the medication from the component in the ganja that is appropriate to the condition that they have. And that's really very important. And so you walk then with your certification, if you have any relatives abroad who you think might want to know if they can carry their prescription down here, ask them to carry their prescription because they might need it. It's not that they can't import the ganja for the purpose of their medicinal use or scientific research, if it's a big amount and there's authorization, but there has to be that authorization and there has to be that research. I just want to go back to cultivation for Rastafarian sacramental purposes. The application is made. Cultivate ganja for religious purposes as a sacrament in adherence to the Rastafarian faith. That takes care of the matter if that application is accepted and that license is granted. That ganja that is cultivated there and smoked there is not against the Dangerous Drugs Act. There is also the possibility of holding events that observe the Rastafarian rites. So adherents to the Rastafarian faith can hold an event, and I'm told that there have been events like this, where an application is made to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, and the application is granted, that this event is an event to celebrate and or observe the Rastafarian faith, and therefore marijuana will be smoked there. Once that license is granted, that event and the persons there is declared exempt and are not liable for any offense under the Dangerous Drugs Act, and is not liable for even transporting the ganja to this place or the possession, as long as that exemption has been granted by the licensing authority. So basically, that licensing authority is actually created by the Dangerous Drugs Act. And its purpose is to regulate the industry in ganja for medical, therapeutic, or scientific purposes. And that body issues the license, permits, authorizations for the handling of ganja, and for monitoring and regulating persons who have been issued license and permits and authorizations. That body is made up of persons from several ministries of government, the National Council on Drug Abuse, academia, civil society, and non-governmental, community-based, and faith-based organizations. So therefore, I think, in a nutshell, might have got a picture that it's not that there is a free-for-all. No. Because the issues of sale of ganja, of packaging for export, comes up every day in. So if you are traveling in a car, in a package, tightly wrapped with 40 pounds of ganja, it is not likely to believe that you are just on your way home to stock up for 1 year of 2 ounces. That the way that is done suggests that you are taking steps to sell or taking steps preparatory to export. Those are still prohibited by the Dangerous Drugs Act. And so it's not a free-for-all. But as far as our development in our journey with ganja goes, these are the significant changes that have been made by the amendments, particularly the 2015 amendment and the 2021 amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act. Under 2 ounces cannot be arrested for it, though there are some circumstances where there's a discretion in the police officer to issue you a ticket, which costs $500 and which is an offense not to pay. And there are some circumstances in which you can be routed the National Council on Drug Abuse to try to see if you can deal with your addiction. Cultivation itself too, as you have heard is itself quite possible. The members of the Rastafarian faith, everybody, and scientific people want to do scientific research and so on. All these persons can apply for exemption by applying to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, which is designed to grant that. And finally, at the end of the PowerPoint, actually, there is a table which gives you a very clear idea where you to try and access it of who may apply to the licensing authority for an exemption or a license or a permit or an authorization. The duly accredited tertiary institution, person 18 years or older who's an adherent to the Rastafarian faith, and in the organization is comprised of persons who are adherents to the Rastafarian faith. I, at the end, just wish to remind everybody that ganja is only one part of the provisions in the Dangerous Drugs Act. And that these provisions in relation to the to ganja really provide for some exemptions is an attempt, I think, to ease the pressure on both the youth and the police. Since the smoking of ganja is so endemic, so like a youth less than 2 ounces, there's no need to haul that person to court. But the police still has that discretion, so it eases the pressure. It eases the pressure on the Rastafarian community because the smoking of ganja for them is not recreational. It is a part of their religious observance and their religious rights. And therefore, this is quite an important development in our law and our approach to ganja. And finally, just the point, if you are asked by your relative from foreign or anybody, what is the position with ganja in Jamaica? Probably would not be wrong to say to them, well, you know, it's regulated. Yes, because that is the truth. It is regulated. Any ganja thing that is going on, many of the ganja things that's going on is going on under the auspices and the authorization of the Cannabis Licensing Authority. And the pressure is eased on the youth, and therefore the pressure is eased on the court. And so that is it. It's regulated. So if I were to ask you to remember 3 phrases from this, it would be over 2, under 2, and regulated. That sums up the position with ganja at the moment. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Madam Hostess. Yes, that's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fletcher. At this time, we are going to invite questions in the chat. And if there are any members of the live audience, also questions from you. We do have one already in the chat, which is asking about open spaces and whether that would include, for instance, attendance at an open air concert.
Yes, yes, listen, I know that in fact you go to your concert and you're smelling ganja. And you're saying to yourself, this is not why this is what I came for. Truth is that, as I said earlier, unless an application has been made to the Cannabis Licensing Authority, grant an exemption, and in fact, an authorization to have ganja smoked at a particular event, it is an offense to smoke within 5 meters of any public space. And public space means those places where people gather. Of course, there's a very practical problem. But I think I'm on safe ground in saying that ganja smoke travels very far. Might have some difficulty proving the 5 meter problem. But be that as it may, yes, public spaces involves events for which there is not necessarily any license. I know of one musical event that has a license, has had a license. Yes, and but what those promoters did is they had a sectionalized area actually advertised as a smoking area. I don't know if it helped, but that's what they did. But yes, unless there's an exemption or an authorization, it's not allowed.
Thank you. While I await other questions in the chat, Mr. Fletcher, I recall part of the Dangerous Drugs Act speaks to 5 plants per household.
Yes.
Within their premises.
Yes.
So as you know, in Jamaica, we have multifamily households,
yes,
or households that have multiple families.
Yes.
So, 15 plants are found around the yard, as we call it in Jamaica.
3 families.
Yes. Would that be treated, and can that be treated as, yes, there are 3 families there, and that would be acceptable?
Yes.
Have you ever faced or encountered anything like that? How does that type of investigation would extend to?
Initially, I think there were 1 or 2, I would say, minor disputes about that. You might have found 20 plants in a yard. You claim it. It's 1 household, then that is, unless there's a permit, that is illegal. Yes. And I don't think in multi-household premises that a wise police party would seriously extend their very precious time to resolving that issue. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. We're still giving the listening audience more time to ask questions.
It's interesting that you're giving people more time, because from my little research, it seems to me as if there are some of these provisions that are pretty well known. The tones is one of the tones is thing seem to be of common currency. People are not particularly sure about the 5 plants. Most people seem to think it's 4 plants.
Oh.
Yes, I don't know whether there was a debate at one time as to whether it should be 4 or 5. Yeah, so these are the things that have been, this is what is new. I want some attention to be paid to the point I made at the end, that it is not a free-for-all. That when it comes to packaging and exporting and selling, the old legal rules still remain.
All right, I am not seeing any more questions in the chat at this time.
I think Mr. Romario Adams seems to have a question because I see his face on screen.
He is actually going to address you on our behalf with the vote of thanks. If a question proceeds that, certainly Romario, you're free, but I'm going to turn over to Romario.
Okay, Romario.
Good morning, Mr. Fletcher.
Good morning, Romario.
Yes, so on behalf of the Normal Manly Legal Aid Clinic,
yes,
we would like to extend our sincerest gratitude for taking your time out of your day to come and deliver such an informative presentation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that everyone present today would have benefited from the information that you shared on the Dangerous Drug Act, and more specifically, Ganja, as you may say. Under 2 ounces, over 2 ounces, and it is regulated.
Yes. You remember that, you remember the key to the thing. Yeah.
Thanks again, Mr. Fletcher.
Yes. Thank you very much, Romario. It is my pleasure. And I wouldn't go as far as saying that I can be called upon at any time, but it was definitely my pleasure. Yes, thank you. Good.
All right, thank you so much. And for our listening audience, the next broadcast commences at 2:30 p.m.
Yes.
And for further information, information about services here at the Legal Aid Clinic, they can visit the website at nmls.edu.jm or email nmls.lac@uemona.edu.jm. There is also a WhatsApp, 876-561-9803. And thanks again, Mr. Fletcher.
Okay, good. Thank you.